After hearing from the doctors that his dying wife had, at most, 3 days left, the man suddenly squeezed her hand. A smile crept across his face as he leaned in and whispered, "Finally. I've been waiting on this for so long. The house, the money, everything you got is going to be mine real soon." When he walked out of the private suite, the woman stared at the closed door for a long moment. Then she turned her head and called out to the housekeeping woman working in the hallway. "If you do exactly what I ask," she said, her voice trembling but firm, "you'll walk away with enough to forget about scrubbing floors forever." Vondra St. James never did like hospitals. Even back in her younger days, the smell of bleach made her throat scratch, and the sight of those starched white coats made her spirit uneasy. But with age, she found herself checking in more often than she cared to admit. First, the blood pressure would spike, then her heart would act up, or her joints would remind her that her youth had long since packed its bags and left town. This time, she hadn't come by ambulance. It started with what she thought were regular complaints: dizzy spells, a heaviness in her limbs, trouble catching her breath at night. Her primary care physician listened to her chest, looked at her blood work, shook his head, and wrote out a referral to the University Medical Center. "You need to be admitted, Ms. Vondra. We need to check the heart, the lungs, the whole works. This isn't a joke anymore." Vondra sighed but didn't argue. At her age, it was better to be safe than sorry. In the waiting room, she sat on a stiff chair, clutching her purse on her lap, watching the double doors where the doctors disappeared. It was chaotic. Someone was being wheeled past on a gurney, someone else was loud talking about waiting too long, and another person was weeping quietly in the corner, hugging a plastic bag of clothes. "Vondra St. James?" a voice called from the front desk. She stood up, adjusted her silk scarf, and walked over. "Come on back, we'll get you processed," the nurse said efficiently, taking her ID and insurance card. "Internal medicine unit. You requested a private room?" Vondra nodded. "Private, yes." That had been Drayton's idea, her second husband. "Ain't no need for you to be lying up in a room with strangers," he'd said when she got the referral. "We got the money, Vondra. We ain't cutting corners on your health." Money. It was Vondra's money, of course. The brownstone in the city, the lake house, the 401k, the stocks, everything earned and saved from her previous life. Drayton had walked into a turnkey life, as she sometimes thought, with a faint, private smile, though she never said it out loud to keep the peace. You couldn't say anything bad about him, really. He didn't drink to excess, didn't run the streets openly. He kept the house tight, was always polite, and brought flowers on Mother's Day and birthdays. The church ladies would whisper with a hint of jealousy, "Lord, you got lucky, Vondra. A second husband, and a younger one at that? All of ours are resting in the cemetery, and here you are with a gentleman caller turned husband." She would just wave them off. Lucky, unlucky, and we just living. True, sometimes a sharp edge slipped into his words, like when he'd say, "In this day and age, you can't get nowhere without capital. It's a blessing we have a cushion, Vondra. We can face old age in peace." He always said we. But Vondra knew whose cushion it was. She didn't pay it much mind, though. After 50, you just want peace in your home, no drama. And Drayton was there. He drove her to appointments, reminded her about her pills. For that alone, she was grateful in her own way. The private room was small but decent. A hospital bed, a sleeper chair for guests, a flat screen on the wall, and curtains with a generic floral pattern. It was quiet. Vondra whispered a quick prayer. Less talking, more resting. The first few days went by in a blur of routine. Blood draws, IV drips, the cuff squeezing her arm every few hours, and endless forms to sign. The doctors spoke little, smiling politely, but there was a guarded look in their eyes. Vondra could feel they were discussing her case with a certain heaviness in the hallway. On the third day, they took her down for extensive imaging. Lying on the gurney in the hallway, she stared at the acoustic tiles on the ceiling for what felt like hours. Then came the machines, the cold sensors, the robotic commands. Breathe. Don't breathe. Don't move." When it was over, they wheeled her back. After lunch, her attending physician walked in, a tall man with tired eyes, Dr. Perrin. "Ms. Vandra," he started, "we need to have a conversation, and it's probably best if your husband is here for this." "Call him then," she said calmly. "He promised to stop by this evening." That evening, Drayton arrived as usual, carrying a Whole Foods bag with fresh fruit and yogurts. "How's my girl doing?" he smiled, kissing her forehead. "Oh, Doc is here." Vandra watched his face. He looked slightly tense, but attentive, like a concerned husband should. Dr. Perrin motioned for Drayton to sit. "The situation is complicated," the doctor began. "The scans showed serious issues. There is a tumor, and it has already caused complications. We can attempt surgery, but the risk is extremely high." "How high?" Drayton asked, shooting a glance at Vandra. "The probability of the patient surviving the procedure and recovering is, well, it's there, but it's slim." Dr. Perrin chose his words carefully. "And without surgery?" "I'm afraid we'd be counting in days. 3, maybe 5 max." A heavy silence filled the room. Vandra felt her insides knot up. 3 days. She'd heard phrases like counting the days in other people's stories, on TV dramas, but now those words were sitting right on her chest. She looked at Drayton. He was staring at the floor, his brow furrowed. Then he looked up at the doctor. "So, it's either risk it right now, and maybe she doesn't make it on the table, or we wait for the end?" "Roughly speaking, yes," the doctor nodded. "We can't rush into this blindly, but we also don't have the luxury of time." Drayton sighed, running a hand down his face. "We need to talk privately. Is that okay?" "Of course." Dr. Perrin stood up. "I'll check back later." When the door clicked shut, Vandra turned to her husband. "Well," she tried to force a smile, "another adventure in my old age, huh?" Drayton scooted closer, sat on the edge of the bed, and took her hand. "Don't you go thinking negative thoughts," he said softly. "Doctors always like to scare folks. Maybe they'll find something else. Another way." He was saying the right things, but there was a strange frequency in his voice that Vandra hadn't tuned into before, a vibration she didn't recognize. "I ain't a child, Drayton," she said quietly. "I understand what he said." They talked a little longer, about needing to call Trayvon, her son from her first marriage, to tell him she was in the hospital, about warning her sister, about the surgery. It felt like a normal conversation, given the circumstances. Then Drayton checked his watch. "I'm gonna head out, babe. You get some rest. I'll be back first thing in the morning." He leaned in, kissed her cheek, and left. Vandra was alone. Outside the window, the city lights were flickering on. A cart rattled down the hall. Someone groaned in pain nearby. She lay there staring at the ceiling, trying not to think about 3 days or survival rates. No matter how long you live, death is always inconvenient. A strange thought crossed her mind. She didn't notice when she drifted off. She woke up sensing a presence in the room. It was pitch black outside now. The fluorescent light above the sink cast a cold glow. Drayton was standing there. He had come back. "You back already?" Vandra asked, her voice thick with sleep. "I thought you went home." "I have time," he answered, looking at her with an expression she couldn't place. "Wanted to talk one more time, without the doctor." He sat on the chair and took her hand again. His fingers were warm, strong. Vandra squinted at his face. He was smiling, but it wasn't his smile. It wasn't the smile she was used to. And suddenly, squeezing her hand, he whispered, almost affectionately, "Finally." Vandra raised an eyebrow. "What?" "Finally," he repeated, leaning closer. "I've been waiting on this for so long. The house, the money. Everything you got is gonna be mine real soon. You just rest now. Don't struggle." He smiled openly, freely, like a man who had just set down a 100-pound sack of bricks. For a few seconds, Vandra didn't process the meaning. The words floated in the air like dust motes, but then they aligned. The house, the money. Yours becomes mine. She felt an ice-cold wave wash over her entire body. Drayton didn't seem to notice her expression. "Don't get me wrong. It's not that I want you to die," he continued smoothly, as if making an excuse. "It's just, sooner or later it was going to happen anyway. And now, at least everything is clear. I'll get the paperwork sorted, bury you with class. It'll be a beautiful service, don't you worry." He said it in the same tone he used to ask if she wanted herbal tea, calm, measured. Vandra stared at him in silence. Her eyelids felt heavy, her lips dry as parchment. For a second, she thought this was a nightmare, a drug-induced hallucination. Any moment she would wake up and Drayton would be the man she thought she knew. But he was sitting right there, alive, real, with that stranger's smile plastered on his face. "You look a little out of it," he noted. "Don't take it to heart, okay? That's just life." He patted her hand like she was an old buddy and stood up. "All right, I'm out. We'll tell the doctors tomorrow whatever they want to hear. You sleep." He left, closing the door gently. Vandra lay there, staring at a spot on the wall. Her thoughts had stopped. There was only a hollow emptiness. After some time, she heard a squeak at the door. A woman in navy blue scrubs appeared, holding a mop and bucket. "Can I come in?" she asked softly. "Just need to hit the floor real quick." "Come on," Vandra whispered. The woman, maybe 40 years old, had tired eyes but soft features. Quiana Rollins. She entered, set the bucket by the wall, and started moving the mop quietly. She had clearly been nearby during the visit, though she was diligently pretending she hadn't seen or heard a thing. Vandra watched her for a moment, then spoke sharply. "Miss?" Quiana jumped slightly and looked up. "Ma'am? What's your name?" "Quiana," she answered, a bit confused. "Quiana Rollins." "Quiana," Vandra repeated slowly. "Come here a minute, please." Quiana wrung out the mop, left it in the bucket, and approached the bed. "Yes, ma'am?" Vandra looked at the woman's hands, dry, ashy from harsh chemicals. She looked at her eyes, where exhaustion had settled in permanently. "How long you been working here?" Vandra asked. "Going on 5 years," Quiana replied. "Before that, I was doing housekeeping at a hotel, but the benefits are a little better here. Shifts work better for my schedule." "Hard work, I bet." "You get used to it," Quiana shrugged. "The sick folks, the grieving, the night shifts, a person can get used to anything." Vandra sighed deep in her chest. "Quiana," she said, "if you do exactly what I ask, you can forget about this job forever." The cleaner frowned, not understanding. "Excuse me?" She looked wary. "I ain't asking you to do nothing bad," Vandra said quietly. "I'm asking you to help me, and I'll pay you for it." "Okay?" Quiana trailed off. Inside, a mix of curiosity, fear, and caution swirled. Nobody had ever said words like that to her. Forget about this job forever. "I don't even know what to say," she admitted. "What kind of help?" Vandra turned her head to the door, checking it was clear, then lowered her voice. "Come closer." Quiana leaned in. "You probably heard what the doctor said," Vandra began. "I don't have much time, and I just heard what my husband really thinks about me." She briefly recounted what Drayton had said, stripping away the emotion, reporting it like reading a court transcript. "You understand now?" she asked. "I do not want everything I worked for my whole life to go to a man who is standing there with a stopwatch waiting for me to die. I have a son from my first marriage. He lives in Chicago. He has his own family, his own struggles. I have a niece. I want them protected, and I want you to get something for being my hands and feet right now." Quiana listened, eyes cast down. "But what can I do?" she asked. "I'm just EVS. I got a mop, a bucket, and a key to the supply closet. You got access to the hallway, and you got the ability to call a mobile notary without my husband knowing," Vandra said calmly. "I'm rewriting my will and my power of attorney. I need someone to call the notary service. Meet them at the entrance, bring them up, and then, when it's done, keep their mouth shut. Don't run and tell my Drayton. Can you do that?" Quiana thought about it. Doubt spun in her head instantly. What if this is a scam? What if the notary says it's illegal? What if the husband finds out and gets me fired? But a second thought cut through. What if this is the only chance I ever get to break this cycle? Shift, home, sleep, repeat. There's mobile notaries that come to the hospital, Quiana said quietly. I've seen 'em. Sometimes they come for folks who are passing. Good, Vondra nodded. Only we gotta move fast. Doctors gave me 3 days, maybe less. Can you get the number tomorrow morning? I can, Quiana nodded. But are you sure you want to do this? Your husband? My husband wants my assets, Vondra cut her off firmly. I already paid for my kindness with 20 years of marriage. That's enough. Now I get to decide who gets what. She paused and added, Quiana, you married? Was, Quiana shrugged. He left for a younger girl. Just me and my boy now. He's in community college. This job is all I got, and it barely pays the light bill. Then you understand, Vondra noted. Help me. I ain't asking you to break the law. Just help me use it right. Quiana straightened up. I'll find the notary, she said softly. I'll let you know by lunch. She picked up her mop, but her movements weren't as mechanical as before. Her mind was racing. The night was rough for Vondra. She drifted into short naps, waking up gasping for air. Drayton's phrase kept looping in her head. Finally, house, money, all yours becomes mine. So that's who's been sleeping next to me all these years, she thought. Not a partner, a beneficiary. Morning started with needles, IV bags, and blood pressure cuffs. A nurse poked her head in to check her vitals and said the doctor would come by later. By lunchtime, Quiana appeared. She stood in the doorway, hesitating. Come in, Vondra nodded. Well, I talked to the girls at the front desk, Quiana started. There's a signing agent who does hospital calls. Said they can be here after 3 o'clock. You need to have a witness or family, but the doctor can vouch that you are of sound mind. Family will be here, Vondra said calmly. I'm calling my son. He'll be here tomorrow, but we can prep the papers today. Quiana blinked, surprised. And your husband? My husband will find out later, Vondra said dryly. Through the probate lawyers, like it's supposed to be. She borrowed Quiana's charger, plugged in her phone, and dialed her son. Trayvon, she said when she heard his voice. Situation is serious. I'm in the hospital. No, don't panic, I'm holding on, but I need you on a flight. Today, there's business we need to handle. Her son was confused, asking questions, but Vondra didn't want to scare him with the grim diagnosis over the phone yet. Just come, baby. We'll talk. It's important. Then she asked for the doctor. When Dr. Perrin arrived, Vondra asked directly, Doctor, I have a notary coming today. Can you certify in my chart that I am lucid and making my own decisions? The doctor looked surprised, but nodded. Of course, Ms. Vondra. We can document your mental status. And regarding the surgery, I agree to it, Vondra said. He looked at her closely. You've thought it through. Better than if I hadn't, she replied. I'm going to try. The rest is in God's hands. The notary arrived closer to 4, a petite woman in a sharp blazer with a leather portfolio. Quiana brought her up as promised, quiet, no fuss. Ms. St. James, the notary introduced herself. She checked Vondra's ID. I understand you want to execute a last will and testament and a durable power of attorney? Yes, Vondra nodded. We don't have much time, so let's get to it. She dictated calmly and clearly. The brownstone to her son, Trayvon. The lake cottage split between Trayvon and her niece. A specific high-yield savings account left via a payable on death designation to Ms. Quiana Rollins. And for the husband? The statutory elective share required by state law, Vondra said. Just the minimum so he can't contest it in court. Everything legal, everything by the book. The notary raised her eyebrows when she heard the cleaner's name, but she didn't say a word. Her job was to notarize, not to judge. You are certain you want to leave a significant sum to a non-relative? She clarified gently. I am certain, Vandra said firmly. Sometimes you meet strangers who do more for you in an hour than family does in a lifetime. She signed the papers with a shaky hand. The doctor stepped in for a moment to witness her clarity. Quiana stood by the door the whole time, guarding the perimeter. When the notary left, Vandra beckoned Quiana over. There, she whispered. It's done. Why did you do that? Quiana blurted out. I didn't do nothing to deserve. You heard what you weren't supposed to hear, Vandra answered softly. And you didn't run and gossip. And you didn't turn away when I asked for help. That's enough. Quiana looked down, a lump forming in her throat. That evening, Drayton returned. This time without a bag, just clutching his smartphone. So, how we feeling? He asked, walking to the bed. Hanging in there, Vandra said. Had a notary come by. He snapped his head up. A notary? What for? Panic flashed in his eyes. Surgery is risky, Vandra said, keeping her face stone cold. Doctors aren't sure. Decided I needed to get my paperwork in order just in case. Update the will. Fix the power of attorney. Drayton moved closer quickly. And what exactly did you write? He tried to keep his voice even. Hope you didn't forget about me. The law says nobody forgets a spouse, Vandra said ambiguously. He narrowed his eyes. Fair is when everything comes to me, he muttered under his breath, but aloud he switched tracks. Well, all right, probably just nerves. You rest up. Tomorrow we decide on the surgery. He didn't stay long. He was jittery, constantly checking his texts, typing furiously. Vandra watched him and felt a strange serenity. Let him think I'm stupid, she thought. The important thing is, he can't touch a thing now. The next morning, Trayvon arrived. He was a tall, broad-shouldered man, bursting into the room with a mix of fear and relief. Mama, why didn't you tell me sooner? He exclaimed, hugging her gently. I would have been here yesterday. Didn't want to worry you, Vandra smiled tiredly, though I guess I worried you now anyway. They talked for a long time about the diagnosis, the surgery, and the legal documents. Trayvon was upset. She handled it alone at first, but then he calmed down. Mama, whatever you want, that's how it's going to be, he said finally. I just want you to live. To hell with the rest of it. I'm gonna try, Vandra said. But no promises. Bodies get old, baby. Drayton didn't join their conversation. He popped in for 2 minutes, said hello to his stepson, made a joke that didn't land, and disappeared on business. By afternoon, the surgeon came by. Surgery was scheduled for 6:00 a.m. Be ready, he said. Minimal activity today. We'll take you down early. Vandra felt at peace. Decision made. Papers signed. Son is here. Quiana was mopping the hall outside, occasionally giving her a subtle nod. I'm with you. The surgery was brutal. In the morning, they wheeled Vandra away. She signed the consent form, and the anesthesia took hold. For her, it passed in an instant. Bright lights, cold steel, masks, voices, then darkness. When she came to, the first thing she felt was a profound weakness. Her eyelids felt like lead weights. Her mouth was like the Sahara. Ms. Vandra, can you hear me? A nurse's voice floated from somewhere. She managed a tiny nod. Surgery is over, the nurse said. You made it. Doctors say you survived the hard part. Vandra tried to speak, but only a croak came out. Don't talk yet, the nurse soothed. Just breathe. You'll see your husband and son soon. Hours later, they moved her back to her room. Her head was spinning. Her body felt alien, but deep inside there was a clear realization. She was alive. Not 3 days, some amount of time. And that some amount was enough to look at life differently now. Trayvon was the first to see her. He sat by the bed, holding her hand, thanking the doctors, repeating, You did it, Mama. You're tough. Drayton came later. His face was tight. Well, congratulations, he said, sitting on the edge of the mattress. Pulled through. A real fighter. I really thought... He cut himself off, swallowing the words. Vondra looked at him. His smile didn't fool her anymore. "Yeah, I pulled through," she whispered. "Gonna have to wait a little longer." "Huh?" He frowned, confused. "What you mean by that?" "Nothing." She smiled faintly. "Just talking to myself." "Vondra," he said suddenly. "I mean, I have been taking care of you. I've been here all these years." "You were," she agreed, "and thank you for that. But now we walking different paths. I ain't kicking you out the house, Drayton, you live. But don't you hold your breath waiting for my funeral like it's a holiday. It ain't happening." He wanted to say something, but the words stuck in his throat. He turned around and walked out, his shoulders slumped. Vondra didn't get discharged quickly. Rehab took weeks. She lost weight, got weak, then slowly built her strength back up, first standing with help, then walking the corridor, gripping the handrail. Drayton kept visiting, but not every day. First, he used work as an excuse. Then he started complaining quietly, that it was hard being alone, the house was empty, the gas money was adding up. He was still hoping the situation might tilt back in his favor, hoping maybe she'd survive the surgery but would fade away soon and he could fix the documents. But the documents were already filed in the county clerk's system. Life, no matter how hard, has a way of putting things in their place. Maybe not immediately, maybe through pain and betrayal, but it happens. She remembered that night in the room, Drayton's satisfied grin, and Quiana's words, "A person can get used to anything." People get used to cruelty if they're the ones dishing it out, Vondra thought. But you can't ever get used to kindness. That always feels like a surprise. Vondra felt truly peaceful. She didn't know how much time lay ahead on this strange, difficult road, but she knew one thing for sure. That time belonged to her now, not to someone else's calculations. And that was the greatest gift of all. Did you like the story, and which city are you listening from? Thank you so much for your sweet support. I'm looking forward to your comments on the story. On the screen you can see 2 new life stories that I highly recommend. There's so much more on my channel, don't forget to subscribe. See you in the next life story, with love and respect.